This is our weekly session. What is real estate tokenization? The new frontier of property on the blockchain. I'll introduce myself personally first. So I'm Miguel Aleixo. I'm the co-founder and managing director for BRIK projects. We tokenize Australian property. We have a current series at the moment, our first series, the BRIK, which is a property here in Brisbane, an A-class residential property in Brisbane. So we've started the journey in the real estate tokenization, and we've got 10 more properties in the next 12 months coming up. So that's pretty much a little bit about me. Jake? Yeah.
My name is Jake Menard. I am a project manager for Dwell Homes, Inc. We are located in the Midwest U.S. We are currently looking to tokenize some rental properties here in the U.S., and we are underway creating models currently for these homes. Very passionate about the tokenization space, and I'm very grateful that BRIK has kept me under his wing over the last few months to learn more and more about property tokenization.
Part of the team, Jake. Again, it's the two of us obviously doing this show every week. It's about trying to educate people in terms of what is real estate tokenization. So our objective is people who understand blockchain to come and learn in terms of what is real estate tokenization, and also bringing people who know nothing about blockchain to actually learn what is blockchain, and two, what is real estate tokenization. So we do have a special guest every week. We try to bring a special guest, and we try to sort of bring people from different angles that sort of ties in with real estate. So last week we had a lady, Mary. She's a real estate investor. I'll call her a serial real estate investor who also is a real estate educator. So we had her on last week, which was fantastic. It was great to get her points of views in terms of traditional real estate. I think Mary is actually going to be starting investing in tokenized real estate. She has dabbled in before, but nothing sort of serious. But she's now looking at our property token series as a first sort of on international property to put a foot in the water. But yeah, look, it's again, this session is about bringing different angles. One, token educator at what tokenization is of real estate, and then obviously bring different angles to the conversation. And today I invited Kevin Lynch, well-renowned photographer, has worked across different parts of the world. Has seen real estate from different angles, given his clients. He's worked with Kobey Bryant. He's worked with the Steve Irwin family in terms of the Crikey Comes Irwins, which was a series. And I'm sure most of you know Steve Irwin and the great things they do in terms of being the wildlife warriors that they are and saving the animals throughout the world. And probably another session I'll share some insights into Steve Irwin in terms of what he means to us as Aussies here in Australia. But so Kevin worked with the family in that series, and worked with various other peoples around the world. From here's Kevin now. And Kevin's worked with various people, and I will get to come in, Kevin, to actually introduce yourself. But I'm actually giving you a bit of it's a good time because I'm actually giving you a bit of a profile, brief profile description and some of the things you've done. And probably one of the things when I invited Kevin, and he said to me, well, I'm not an expert in real estate. And I said to him, no, I'm not having you to be an expert on real estate. I'm having you to sort of give your worldly experiences in terms of different cultures and how real estate's impacted different cultures, and obviously talking to some of your clients as you work with some of your clients around the world, getting those points of view in terms of what real estate has done and impacted different cultures. So over to you, Kevin. I'll let you sort of introduce yourself, and thank you for coming on. We really appreciate that, mate.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Okay, first of all, thanks for inviting me. It's always a pleasure to be on. More of a learner than an advisor if it comes to this world that we live in now, but I'm really happy to participate in any way and give my 2 cents worth into this, and I appreciate the cultural aspect. Part of it is that my occupation has given me the great privilege to meet many people in many different walks of life all around the planet. And it's just amazing to me how this gold rush of the NFT is going to impact every continent on this planet in the future, and presently it's just being created and molded. So I do love the idea, since I used to invest into real estate, and I remember in the past how difficult it sometimes can be for people to get their first house or their second. And this gives such great opportunity to invest into real estate, which is probably one of the most promising investments you can make, with the greatest return and stability. And we all know that nothing really drops. It only goes up in prices. And we just have to go by history. 50 years ago, look what a house was worth then and what it is worth today. And we can't even put that in, a house that was sold for $100,000 might be worth $4 million in certain neighborhoods. So I do think it's great to be able to have this opportunity that you're presenting to invest into real estate and as an NFT. And I think that is totally a revolutionary way for anybody to participate. No matter how much money they have, they can get in. Low end, high end, whatever they feel comfortable with. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, and this is like as I said to you, this is why it's great to get your angle. You've been across different cultures, and you would have seen and talking, obviously, in working with some of the people around the world. Obviously, you get in conversations, and you can see, you can hear and observe in terms of what property is doing to people. So again, it's great to get your insights from that perspective. And as I said to you, it wasn't meant for you to bring you on to be a real estate expert. But again, you are an expert in observing cultures and observing people, and given the people you work with. So, in terms of that real estate angle on things, so I do really appreciate having you on, Kevin. And I'll probe you on a few things and questions, and be more than happy to speak up about things that comes to your mind. So. Although there's a bit of structure, but we also like to give a bit of unstructured, a bit of info, not so formal as well. And as I said to you too, us Aussies like to have a bit of fun. We take things serious, but at the same time, we'd like to have a bit of fun as well. And you probably sort of people that here know that I'm like that. I'm consistent in terms of being your typical Aussie, having a bit of fun at the same time. But in terms of the people that in terms of this session that we have every week, obviously we've got quite a vast difference of experience when it comes to blockchain understanding and real estate tokenization in particular. So you've got people that might come on here or might be listening to the recording later on that want to know what blockchain is, and then obviously what real estate tokenization is specifically. So I'll probably just bring it back to basics first, to start with the basics, and then we can sort of build as we go along on this session. So in terms of blockchain, what is blockchain? I'll try to explain it to people who don't know. I keep it very simple. Blockchain is just another database. So we obviously came from hard things, but if you go back 30 years ago, where we used to work in ledgers, if you're an accountant, you used to work in those big, massive bloody cash books that were very manually. That was a database, a manual database, a ledger. Then we moved on to computers, basically the database on your hard drive. Then we moved on to cloud-based databases. So somewhere up there in the cloud, in cloud servers, whether it be the Google servers or whatever, you've got cloud-based servers that live up there. Well, blockchain is just another form of a database where data is kept. The only difference is in terms of that the database that sits up there, that it's decentralized, so nobody controls that database. It's made up of various computers that contribute to the ecosystem. So it's just another database that basically data is on there, but data can't be changed. Generally, data, once it's on there, it can't be changed. So that's basically in a nutshell what the blockchain is. So I think sometimes people get too much caught up with the fancy words around trying to describe a blockchain. It's just another database, basically, but a different type of database. And then in terms of, we sort of hone in terms of real estate tokenization. So basically, real estate tokenization is basically having a property, a traditional property, real estate property that can actually be fractionalized into different pieces in terms of its ownership. So basically, rather than have one person owning one property, you basically have 40,000 people owning that property through fractionalizing that property into tokens, into property tokens to be specific. So those property tokens, you can own one, you can own many, you can own 20,000 to 40,000. It's but that there is actually recorded, that data in terms of the ownership of those tokens, property tokens, is recorded on the actual blockchain, the database. So that's just sort of simplifies in terms of what is blockchain and what is property tokenization. Probably as an example, just to sort of demonstrate a simple example. Some of us have probably done it in the past, have probably thought about it in terms of going in with 4 other people to buy a property. It might be a property that's worth, cost is $500,000, for example. There's you and 4 other people going to contribute towards it. You don't want to get the banks involved. You basically, let's go and buy this property outright. We'll contribute $100,000 each, and off we go in buying that property. Property tokenization is the fundamentals are the same as that, but now you've got a global audience. You've got a global potential buyers that can actually now buy into that property around the world. It doesn't matter where you're at. So, for example, ours, there's no restrictions on ours in terms anybody from all corners of the world can actually buy one property token. They can buy many property tokens for as little as $80 each. So, and Jake's model is going to be very much the same once he launches his property token series himself there in Chicago. So, again, it's just taking that concept, what we were done in it before with other people. Now we take it on the global scale that provides the opportunity for people to actually to come in and buy it. Jake, you want to sort of add anything to trying to explain what is real estate tokenization from your perspective?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So the one thing that brought me into real estate tokenization, or the idea of it, was when my father would always talk about being stuck with a property for 15 years. Whenever you purchase something, be ready to hold on to it for 15 years in case the market crashes, because usually there's no liquidity, there's no options for liquidity, mostly because you have to buy or sell the entire property at the same time. There's no fractional, there wasn't any fractional ownership opportunities really. So the idea of fractionalizing ownership of a property through tokens on a blockchain just lit my brain up. And now I see property tokenization as an opportunity to increase investor liquidity from basically 0 to 1. And that is something that is extremely important that has yet to be realized in, just the entire real estate sector in general, which is liquidity. And there's a lot of players that are working towards making this a reality for multiple projects. And it's usually pretty much blockchain agnostic, which means they're not, a lot of companies and exchanges and ATSs are working to work with as many projects as possible to make sure that all investors have opportunities for liquidity through the real estate projects that they're looking to fractionally own.
Yeah. And in terms of the actual blockchains themselves, obviously there's various blockchains, the Ethereum blockchain. So the Ethereum blockchain was actually the first one to actually have its first property token series tokenized on. So that was 2019. That was the first property tokenized on there. So, but since then there's obviously been more other blockchains. Ravencoin chain, which is what we're tokenizing ours on the Ravencoin chain. We did start on the Ethereum, but obviously in terms of being advised by DigiShares in terms of what they were doing, and DigiShares are the global service providers in providing the platforms of real estate tokenization platforms. So they created our platform and they maintain our platform. So again, guided by them in terms of where are the chains they were minting and looking at all the strengths and weaknesses on different chains. So again, we decided to switch to the Ravencoin chain, and that's the chain Jake's also minting on as well. So there's also another project, Sarah and Dan, they're also doing theirs on the Ravencoin chain. So again, there's it's basically for the people who don't know what the Ravencoin chain is. So it's actually a bit fork of the Bitcoin chain. So basically, the fundamentals of the Bitcoin chain was started 4 years ago. So the Ravencoin chain started 4 years ago, where they took the founders of the Ravencoin chain, took the fundamentals of Bitcoin, and then basically added its strengths to it in terms of being able to tokenize assets on it. So this is where the Ravencoin has its massive strengths, is in terms you can tokenize assets on it, on the Ravencoin blockchain. And this is where we are today. So it's very early in terms of what's been tokenized. Obviously, NFTs has a major impact on the chain. Now we're actually starting to see properly tokenization on the chain. So the next wave, what's going on the chain. So again, we've got 10 coming up. Jake's got his coming up. Then Sarah's got theirs coming up. Or they're about to launch their first one. So the massive wave that's occurring on the Ravencoin chain from an asset tokenization perspective, especially property tokenization, is quite a massive wave that's building now. So again, that obviously adds a lot of confidence and trust in terms of what's happening on the Ravencoin chain, and obviously belief, and obviously has impact on the price as well. That's just how things happen. The more activity there is, the higher the price goes. Just we saw the Ethereum, what the Ethereum price did with the NFTs, the massive surge last year, and obviously the massive activity and the gas fees that occurred on Ethereum was obviously driven by the NFT surge. So, but yeah, that sort of summarizes it a bit in terms of the basics around what is real estate tokenization. So taking that in terms of, we have a look at real estate in terms of its history, and because you have to always look at history in terms of what's happening now and in the future. And if you look at a place like, for example, in New York, I've been to New York myself, enjoyed my time there, and will in future, because it's got this special vibe in New York that Melinda and I, my co-founders, said we'd like to spend probably 2-3 months in New York just to soak up all the atmosphere in New York, just all the things. It's just all the things, the theatres and so forth. We love New York. But if you ever look at New York in terms of how these days, how centralised it is in terms of real estate, so you got Trump, you got the Warren Buffets, you got all those billionaires that obviously own a lot of property in New York, and it is very much centralised in terms of the ownership of real estate in New York. Obviously, it was never like that before. If you go back, say, 100 years, but I'm using New York as an example in terms of how these days the average person can't buy a property in New York. Would I be right in saying that, Kevin? Given obviously, I know you're based in LA, but obviously you've had a lot of experiences in New York.
Understand. That's all I can say. New York is outrageous. Just like San Francisco has become actually even more expensive per square footage than New York. And it's not getting any better in Los Angeles or Santa Monica, where I work out of, and I live in the Palisades. And just in the last 10 years, the Pacific Palisades has gone up like double and triple, and maybe actually less. And so, it's really changing a lot. My question to you is, when you're offering now these real estate packages, are they now primarily based in Australia at the moment?
Yeah, look, in terms of us BRIK VC projects, we're focusing very much around the southeast Queensland, which takes in Brisbane, Gold Coast, and the Sunshine Coast. So it's a 200-kilometre radius on the coast, only because you got to stick to your lanes in terms of where your networks, where your strengths are, and our strengths are very much because I've been raised here from a young age. My networks, in terms professionally, have been built here. So you start talking about town planners, you start talking to the architects, and talk about the agents. This is our massive point of difference, and property here is unlimited for us. I can get stock. It's not an issue. Making sure it ticks all our boxes every time. So for us, we'll continue to focus in the southeast Queensland, and that's going to be indefinitely focusing here, because we see this. We've got the 2032 Olympics here in 10 years' time, obviously. So that brings just that extra boost to the property market here, even though it's always very consistent in terms of doubling up every 10 years on average here in where we're at. But in terms of we've got these extra variables in play that's going to sort of boost. So what I'd like to see, Kevin, is basically people to see opportunities, and especially on the Ravencoin chain, to see, well, what we're doing, someone can go and do it in Sydney, someone can go and do it in New York, someone can go and do it all over. And actually, there's actually a guy doing it. He's actually came on our show a few weeks ago, Andy, and he's actually looking at doing the same thing in New York. So what I like to see is people say, okay, grab the opportunity. They're obviously in the space and can actually set up their tokenization model to provide access to property in those different areas around the world, and whether it be in London, whether it be in South Africa. And again, and I'm happy to sort of, Jake and I was as a sounding board as people sort of start looking at those different areas to be a sounding board, because again, if we see it, the more the benefits going to give in terms of what we're trying to achieve, and that's providing access to property all over the world.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. I mean, it's a template that you're creating, but the template starts off in a country that, as I kind of mentioned in the last interview, Australia is an exception to most other countries. And I say this in a way because you have, like I mentioned before, the highest minimum wage rate. You have the strongest middle class. You have probably the most stable economy in the world. You have not really immigration pressure or issues. You have a really strong economy. You don't have any debt, zero. We have trillions. And it can only go up from there. And like you mentioned, the Olympics only will enhance the real estate market. And once people come to Australia during the Olympics, I'm guaranteed that many of these people are going to want to come back. Just simply because it is low crime, it has a very, stable market, and people like being in a safe place. And Australia has a lot of wonderful things to offer. I was there only once, but in that short period of time, I was incredibly impressed. Also, just by the simple attitude Australians have towards life, they are very much comfortable with their, I would say, with their economy or with their way of life, but they're also eager to further themselves, and that's why you have the best school system in the world as well for public schools, more over every other country. And it only has promise. It's only promising for investors to want to invest in Australia, and you have a low population rate, so it can only grow. And I think that it makes sense to create the template there. However, I'm not sure if New York could be put in that same template, but it would have to be modified, of course, But maybe Canada would be a perfect example that you could use that same template because it's a very similar kind of economy, I would say, if I'm not mistaken. And I'm not an economist, but it seems like Canadians are similar in the same way, just like South Africans are too. So I get the comparison with South Africa.
Yeah, I mean, you're so right. I mean, you totally agree with the points you made. I think it was doing it in different countries. Obviously, you always have to go back to your own countries, respective countries' legislation, because obviously, what we come up here with Australian ticking all the boxes as far as all different layers of compliance, and obviously me having an accounting background and legal background in terms of for 28 years. As a CPA accountant, obviously, I knew exactly what I was looking at in terms of what things I needed to meet from a legislation perspective here in Australia. And that's going to be a little bit different from other countries. Obviously, if you're in New York, you've got different sets of legislations you've got to meet. And then obviously on top of that, you also have to meet blockchain legislation as well. This is obviously we brought DigiShares into the mix. But again, anybody doing, you always say that there was actually a guy that was looking at the Gold Coast. He was based in the US. He was doing stuff in the US in tokenizing property, and he was going to look at doing something in the Gold Coast. And my advice to him, look, you really need to look at the legislation in the respective country, because it's going to be different across all countries. Whether it be foreign ownership rules, whether it be the capital gains tax, whether it be in terms of stamp duties, in terms of different state level taxes and so forth. So they're all the things you've got to go through, making sure you're ticking all the boxes, that you don't compromise those laws. But again, it's just a matter of identifying, see if there's an opportunity, and see if you can actually do it. Then talking to the right people on the ground, whether it be illegals, accountants and so forth, to start that journey. But I know Andy was very keen in New York. And in property, you also have to have a look in terms of types of properties. Is it A-class property? Is it B-class? Or is it C-class? I mean, we're focusing on A-class. Jake, in terms of the ones you're going to be focusing on, is going to very much in terms of what B, C-class in Chicago?
Yeah, something similar to that. The market, definitely not A-class.
Yeah. Again, the reason, obviously, with A-class is that we're doing on A-class. Obviously, I know my market very well. I know these properties that we're doing it on, they're actually prestige areas. There's a lot of executives that actually do live in the area. With the Olympic scum, that's going to put another layer of executives from around the world want to be close to the action, whether it be the sponsors, whether it be the companies that are actually on the ground involved with the Olympics. So they just put another extra layer on top. But traditionally, so this area, it's actually quite a lot of executives live in the area. I mean, I'm in the area myself. I've always been in the area here for a long time. So again, you got to know your areas, and you got to know if it's A-class, you got to know exactly what that's going to give. And obviously, it's critical knowing what type of property that you're going to be doing with. But yeah, again, it might not work in all A-class might not work in other areas. Say for example, if we do it in Florida, A-class property, tokenize A-class property in Miami, for example, would that work? Not sure. Again, it's up for people to work out in terms of those different areas. And Kevin, you probably will come a few Miami Beach properties in your time.
I wish. I have lots of friends that have moved out of state, California, and moved to Utah, have moved to Wyoming, have moved to Florida and Texas, simply because of taxes and real estate investments. I had one particular very close friend who sold 10 of his apartment buildings in Los Angeles and moved to Utah. And in Park City, where I just visited him recently, you could see, because you brought the Olympics up, you could see how Park City was really built upon the Olympics and how it sustained actually that value and then some. It's incredible to see how valuable and expensive the properties are now in Park City. And it's just amazing to me to see the growth. And we're talking A-class, as you call it, properties. And Florida, same thing. These same people invested into Florida. And I had another friends who he was actually an Olympian, dressage rider for our team, but he was originally from Germany, Jan Ebeling. He built a ranch with his wife, Amy, here in Moore Park, California, a dressage ranch, which was very successful for 20 years. So he was at the London Olympics on our team. He just sold his ranch and he moved to Florida and opened up a new ranch in Florida because he sees more opportunity in investing some of his money into real estate there, as well as, so I do think the template would work in the states that are tax friendly, or tax exempt. I think California is a tougher one, as we all know. In our country, it has the highest state tax, et cetera, et cetera. So probably not so good in California. And I don't think Illinois is doing too well. There's somebody here from Chicago, right? I think Chicago's probably got similar problems to Los Angeles. But then again, I'm not an expert in real estate. I just have a lot of friends and family members who are in real estate and big investors. So I hear sort of in the conversations of what the market looks like.
Yeah. It's interesting, obviously, with sports people. Obviously, I know a lot of sports people that from Australia, when they go to the US, especially golf and tennis, they tend to base themselves out of Florida, especially around Miami in particular. So actually, there's one at the moment that's going over there. So you would know Ash Barty, that one tennis player that just retired a couple of weeks ago. So Ash Barty she's actually going to be buying a house in Florida because her partner's actually a pro golfer himself. So I think they're going to sort of put their efforts behind supporting him to make the circuit over there in the US in the men's golf. And I think she's having a dab at it as help because she's quite an accomplished sportswoman in other sports as well. she's played cricket when she had a time off a few years ago from tennis, and I think she's actually having a dab at golf as well. So watch that space in terms of. I know she made an announcement 2 days ago here in Australia that she's going over to Florida. So, and again, it seems I think Greg Norman just sold a few of his houses too because he's actually coming back home. So he sold his ranch. I think his ranch. I'm pretty sure it was in. Actually, I don't recall. I know he had a few properties in Florida himself. But actually, Kevin, that would be a great project to do on Greg Norman. For yourself.
Yeah. He's done very well for himself during and after his career. Yes. Let's face it, I don't know if there's a more successful golfer on the planet besides Tiger Woods. And I think that he's doing quite well. But look, if you like humidity, Florida is your place. I like dry. I like the dry heat more than the. But it has its payoff.
Yes.
Well, if you're in the right neighborhood in Florida, I guess you can still deal with the humidity. If you are a diehard East Coast person, or a Midwestern person, you are used to it by now. So, I did not grow up in the United States. I grew up in Europe, so I didn't really have a lot of humidity where I lived.
Where did you grow up, Kevin? Germany?
I grew up in Paris, Brussels, and Germany. So I lived in several different. My father was in the service, so I grew up all over Europe and been to 7 different schools. So part of my upbringing was being around all these different cultures, which was, I think, great. But I ended up moving back to the United States in my early 20s, and been living here since.
Probably just, from sort of those early years in Europe, do you sort of recall any sort of things that's trigger your mind from a real estate perspective? What you observed there in Germany and Paris?
Well, I would probably not invest in Paris, but I would probably see Germany as a stable economy, and I probably think the Germans are very good in making intelligent and thoughtful investments. So, not to criticize the French in any way, but I think this Paris is a little bit more complicated, and it's always politically controlled, and you never know what could happen. So that's a little bit unstable, in my opinion. If you buy something for yourself, that's a different story. But if you're looking for investing, I'm not so sure with all the taxes in France how that will affect your investment. Again, I'm not an expert in that field. And I think also Brussels or Belgium have had a very they had some crisis coming to immigration, and they're trying to sort that out. And it's been difficult for them to. Mostly immigration is a good thing because it enhances a culture and brings more flavor to a culture and so on. But sometimes it's burdening financially. And in that case, I think Belgium took a big hit in the last 10 years. France has always been, you never know. But Germany is pretty stable, and Germany is pretty much, I would say, the glue to Europe right now, keeping all the economy in the euro and the European Union together. And, of course, the Germans profit from getting rid of their Deutschmark because they were able to compete much larger, on a larger scale when the euro came out, and that made the Germans even more powerful economically in Europe. But they do carry a lot of the countries, like Greece and sometimes Spain and other countries with that responsibility.
It's interesting to sort of there's all those different countries. I mean, I've been to Germany. I was in Germany in 2006 for the FIFA World Cup there, and got a chance to see a bit of the country there. And huge respect for again they're very structured, very very always focused on quality, and very astute in their decisions that they make. And I was quite impressed as a culture in Germany. I guess it's probably one of those things I don't know either way whether the government's pro blockchain or or against blockchain. Obviously, a lot of governments in the world tend to be at the moment very sort of anti. Aleixo, El Salvador, who actually obviously put their head in the ring with legalizing Bitcoin and adopting as a currency. But I guess they'll also play a part in terms of what people can do, can't do from a real estate tokenization, depending on the government's attitude towards blockchain.
Well, I do think that European countries, especially the Scandinavians, are going to be very open to it, like Finland and Sweden, Denmark. I really think that they are, first of all, they were like actually years in advance in terms of understanding just digital and email and block. I mean, they were way further ahead than in some of even our own country, and like especially like Finland. If you look at how computerized and how everything works there, it's just amazing. And I'm sure that Latvia, Estonia, and Lithuania are doing the same thing because it's just a mindset that they have, and they're very efficient with that and open-minded. I think Germany's might be just a little more complicated because it's a bigger country and a lot's attached to Germany. But I do think the Germans, if they figure this out, they'll be way ahead of a lot of people on this. And I'm sure that they will because they have the mindset, the brain to understand the logic and understand digital and understand sort of numbers more than other countries do. It takes them a little while to catch up to that. I mean, just look at the cars they build and, the coffee makers they make. It requires engineering mindset. And it's just a culture-based,
Yeah, totally agree, Kevin. In terms of when you talk about the Scandinavian countries, so in terms of DigiShares, they're based out of Denmark. So Klaus, the CEO, he's actually Danish. So they started the company. That's where they're based in Denmark. And so they're Finlands. I totally agree. Finland, Denmark, Estonia. Like Estonia, just to give an example, Estonia. There was a project that one of the guys I know, one of the projects here in Australia on the blockchain, and they actually seek legal advice in writing from the lawyers in Estonia because they're so far advanced in the way they're interpreting and adopting and engaging with blockchain that's actually, they saw that as a more really true sense of interpreting legal stuff on the blockchain.
Yeah, I was just speculating, but you just confirmed it.
Yeah, no, so they are the leaders when it comes to the blockchain. So hat offs to that part of the world in leading us. And as I said, DigiShares continue to lead the way when it comes to property tokenization, being advisors and so forth. So, but yeah, that's it's interesting to observe those things. Probably I'll chuck something into the mix here, which can. I mentioned yesterday on my Q&A that it was actually quite interesting. And this is I actually invited him on the show today. He's a guy called Strip Mall Guy. He's heavily into property, got a bit of a following, got around 40,000 followers on Twitter, and it just puts some good content particularly to do with real estate. That's the focus, and real estate investment, obviously traditional real estate investment. And he put out a comment, and I'll make sure I don't misquote his comment. And his comment that he put on there was, so just bring it up here, just bear with me for a sec. I just want to make sure I don't misquote. And I had it here, it's gone. Anyway. But it was just sort of here we go. So this guy put out a quote, is tokenization of real estate nothing more than just a solution looking for a problem? So I had to actually repeat that to myself a few times. Is tokenization of real estate nothing more than just a solution looking for a problem? And I actually got quite angry at that statement because if you ever look in terms of two groups of people around the world, and this is obviously, my focus and Jake's focus, and is very much targeting the access and giving access to the retail market, to the everyday person who's never going to get access to property. And I was sort of repeated that comment to myself, that statement to myself. And the thing is, does this person actually understand what's happening out in the real world in terms of two groups of people? You've got a group of people that in the developed countries, the everyday person on the street accessing property. A lot of people can't access real estate property. You've got rising values in property. You've got the banks that continue to challenge, they're not lending money. You have to the everyday person to buy these increasing values in properties. And you've got wages. If you look at wages over the last 10 years, they haven't moved that much. And they haven't moved much for the last 20 years, for that matter, if compared to the rise in property values. And then you've got the second group of people in developing countries who never banked before. They never had the opportunity to even buy real estate. Now they've got a mobile phone, and with that mobile phone, they've got access to the blockchain. They can get property tokens, they can get NFTs, they can buy crypto. And again, when you sort of talk about that, is this guy living in a very, very bubbled environment? And again,
I think this guy represents no different in the real estate world. He's the same kind of person that, like in the art world, would be the Sotheby's, the Christie's, the big, the Gallaries, who profit from the artist by far more and don't have to pay any kind of dividend or royalty rate from a sale to a sale to a sale, which the artist gets nothing of. So there's no provenance, there's no liquidity that goes to the artist after he sells his first print. It's only the others. And these are the middlemen that you're talking about. The middlemen in any business. They're afraid of the blockchain. They're afraid of what you're creating because it's a revolutionized thing. It goes from basically you become an owner without having to pay everybody else to be part of it. And that is why people are scared or trying to stop it. They're not visionary people. They're just people trying to hold on to an old way of thinking. And, do you think the Apollo program didn't have problems? It was nothing but problem solving. But look what the outcome was. And this is the same thing. If it does create problems, it's only because we have to figure them out, and they're challenging for reasons, because they're worth it. If they weren't worth it, we wouldn't be doing this in the first place, because there's a symbolism of liberty here that we have lost by big corporations and big companies who have almost made it impossible for us to get into the game in a lot of things.
Oh, well said, Kevin. Well said. And this is, like I said, exactly what I was thinking in terms of when I read that complaint. I was thinking in terms of, obviously someone's trying to protect their space. They just obviously whatever they're involved with, how they're making money, obviously they're trying to protect their space. So it's like what the banks are doing at the moment when we start talking about DeFi and so forth. But again, it's just such a narrow-minded, because you know what? We're not saying that traditional real estate is going to be like no more. What we're saying is property tokenization, real estate property tokenization is going to complement the traditional real estate. And like I was saying on the show yesterday with that group with Mary, which they have 160 people on. And what I said to them, basically we're seeing real estate tokenizations to complement people's, traditional real estate portfolio. This is a way. How can you go and buy property in other countries? You can't do it traditional way. So if you can actually buy property tokens in another country, in some great properties that you never would have exposure to, isn't that going to complement your portfolio, your real estate portfolio? So then you've got best of both worlds. But unfortunately, sometimes when people are starting out in real estate, they can't start out in traditional real estate because they haven't got the means. They got the banks aren't going to support them, and they're always chasing their tail because properties keep going up in value and wages stay stable. So again, it's look, it's one of those things. It's education, and I'm hoping I actually invite him to come on the show in a few weeks' time, and I hope he takes up my invitation. But yeah, it's Jake. Everybody, any comments on that statement? I mean, you would have come across that.
That was a really interesting conversation to listen in on. But for the end part there, you make a good point. Traditional real estate won't go away, and traditional real estate still needs to exist. in order for these property tokens, for people to actually have successful investments in the property tokens, right? They go hand in hand. You're not going to be able to sell the properties, digital, like the people who actually own the actual properties, not the people who own the equity through the property tokens. They need, there still needs to be deals made. There still needs to be this and that. So whatever that guy was talking about is, it just seems a little whack. Like, yes, there's problems with everything. Nothing's perfect. All systems still need work. But, you can't, you always need, if you're going to create B, you still need A. That's how I see it.
Yeah, 100%. I think some of you, probably Jackie, probably a bit young to remember that time, but if some of you can cast your mind back to, say, 92, 93, when emails, internet and then emails, around that time when we started using emails, and most of you would have the same response. People were actually really afraid to send attachments through the emails because, who's going to see those, especially if it was obviously confidential information going through the email. So the big thing at the time was, but, that we shouldn't be using emails, You fast track to now, like we probably can count in 1 month how many pieces of mail go out and actually hard copies. We'd be lucky here in BRIK in terms of, and even our businesses in the past, we'd be lucky to send one piece of hard mail going out in actual traditional mail because everything's through email. So how far we've come. And again, there was a lot of obviously pushback back in 92, 93, 94, where people were just afraid just to use emails. And today we couldn't do that email. So again, I think people sort of have to go back and revisit where things were, and I think we're at the same stage now with obviously blockchain and obviously with real estate tokenization, that there's that resistance, and but again, it's here, it's the new frontier, and if you don't get on the bus, you're going to get left behind in terms of having that to be able to add properly tokenized property to your existing real estate portfolio. It's just that's the journey that we're on. But yeah, interesting statement. So hopefully his name was Strip Morguy, that's his profile. JC was actually the one that made me aware of that statement. JC was very very involved in our Ravencorn community. He made me aware of that, and I had to respond to it, and in a very diplomatic way, of course. I think I got a bit emotional yesterday on my Q&A, but only because I'm passionate about it in terms of what we're doing, and given the obviously the access to people in terms of to property is something that obviously it's close to our hearts what we're doing. But yes, we're trying to keep it to an hour. So I think that's sort of most of the points that I wanted to raise, and obviously get Kevin involved with some discussions. Probably as just a general observation, Kevin. Obviously, you've invested in property yourself, and probably from a personal perspective, where do you see personally? Is that something that you were looking at doing yourself in terms of property tokenization? And just a sort of general comments around, just as a closing comments from your perspective, and probably just sort of give us an update also. Given obviously you've made the jump to as an artist to the NFT world, to creating NFT art, obviously with the Kobey Bryant. Give us a bit of an update in terms of where things are at from your perspective.
Thanks for inviting me again into this conversation. I find it really fascinating. It's a new frontier, like you said, and I am still learning every day about it. And as naive as I was 6 months ago, to the help of certain people that are actually listeners right now that are on this whole conversation, I've learned a lot. And I think that, yes, you're right. It is a bus. And if you don't want to get on that bus, it's no different than in the days when I think this is a quintessential moment of time that I can compare to the time when Yahoo offered stock, and then who was this company, Google, that all of a sudden offered stock, and Apple did back in the 80s, and people were trepidatious about wanting to invest into, that world. And I think this is this new opportunity similar to that time. If you had bought stock then and held on to it, my God, right? Where would we all be? And some of us probably did. I unfortunately sold my Tesla and I sold my Apple and stuff like that because I was buying a house. And I think that this is what's great about this too, in comparison to art, is that you can be part of a community and investing together. And how great is it to say, I own a house in Australia, I own real estate here, I'm part of the fractionalization of this real estate there. And it becomes sort of a global community, which we have more power then to change things that are in front of us. Because you can't really leave it up to the politicians to represent your ideas. You have to go out there and do it yourself. And the blockchain allows for that. Until it gets censored by all kinds of governments and they take their piece of the pie, which they will do eventually, this is the time. And I think in the next few years, if you don't get in on this, you will be left behind. And some people don't care, and that's fine. I do care, and I think that I would definitely invest into this, and I'm considering it right now while we speak, and I just have to figure things out and look into it, but I'm really intrigued by it.
Thanks, Stephen. That's fantastic. So in terms of the NFT artwork from your perspective, that's all going well for you?
Well, we are in the process of working on my Kobey Bryant Experience series. We are moving things around. We're also putting part of it on a Ethereum-based blockchain just to reach a larger audience. We started on Ravencoin, as you probably remember, and it was a great experience, a learning experience too. And we are moving into a broader scale. And within the next few weeks, we'll be releasing a new Kobey Bryant image. And we will have an edition piece of that one, which would be 200. And we'll probably release it in sort of spurts of like pertaining to his like number 8 and 24, like his jersey, just because we want to make it more interesting. And that's how we've been advised by certain people. And I'm very excited to be part of this. And I have my KISS images that I'm working on right now, too, when I shot them for Lomo Vogue, which is probably going to follow the Kobey Bryant series. I'm going to be releasing music stuff. And then I'm going to go into the celebrities and see how that works out. And then some of my fine artwork that I've created over the past few years, which is my land art series of landscapes that I've created in the west part of the United States.
That's right. You got a few things happening. It's coming up.
A few, yes.
Yeah.
And I'm working with the UFC actually right now because I did a big book on the Ultimate Fighting called Octagon, and we are releasing now. And we're working with crypto, most likely on this crypto to sell the images that I created for my book project Octagon during the time 2002 and 2009. And these images will be revitalized for the 30-year anniversary of the UFC, as well as a card set that we're creating of like 90 to 100 training cards that are like similar to baseball cards, where you can buy a box of that. We'll probably create like 10,000 of them and sell those. And I'm trying to talk to the UFC of doing an NFT version of that.
That's fantastic. That's great. Just make sure that you don't do it on crypto.com, will you? I know you have set a line with crypto.com.
The UFC had already negotiated with crypto. I'm to the mercy of that. Crypto's not doing too well right now, so we'll see how that goes. I'm trying to pull it away from crypto.
Right. I think I was on at Christmas time. I actually bought some gifts for my family because this is before I got onto Ravencoin. We started buying NFTs on Ravencoin chain, and I had bought some gifts at Christmas time for families and some different things, NFTs on the crypto.com platform, NFT platform, and then trying to transfer it. I couldn't transfer it to them. It's got to stay in my wallet because you couldn't transfer between wallets, even within on crypto.com wallet. So I'm not too sure whether they fix that up there now, but hopefully they have, because it's a massive problem.
Well, all these Ethereum platforms, believe it or not, as big as they are inferior to the Ravencoin platform. Especially if you're trying to do multimedia art, 3D images or whatever it is. They can't even offer that. They're not even set up for it. It's really garbage, a lot of the stuff that's out there. And you got to weed through it. And, hopefully they will come up to speed. But Ravencoin is still, oddly enough, as small as it might be, it's the most sophisticated and artist-friendly platform out there, period.
It's amazing that obviously different tools that you can, things you can do on different Ravencoin NFT marketplaces. Obviously, RV NFT art, which where you had the Kobey Bryant NFT. That actually, some of the things that they do is fantastic. And actually, there's also another one. There's athletes platform on the Ravencoin. They do a lot. They've got an arrangement with Arizona University. And actually, even like I was playing around, actually, because they got the augmented reality version of their basketball coach. Their what was his name? Lloyd. Anyway, I just more of a testing. I ended up buying that the NFT, and it's amazing what you can do now. It's again, it's really up to the imagination in terms of things you can do on the Ravencoin.
It's amazing. I was at the NFT LA convention center. And there was an artist who had a live concert, a classical concert with a woman who was an opera singer singing. And there was a dome that was built specifically for that experience, an NFT Live. And the images that he had drawn and painted were projected into the ceiling of the dome. Oh, wow. And the music, the orchestra, it was so multimedia. It was beautiful. It just didn't touch on a two-dimensional piece of art. It was really fluid and live, and that's the wonderful and beautiful thing that you can do with NFTs that you can't do just with hanging a picture up on a wall. So I highly recommend going to some of these conventions that are now spreading around the country. And I was pleasantly surprised to see the progress being made and the creativity, especially by other artists.
That's
very
fantastic.
inspiring.
That's fantastic, Kevin. And yeah, that's one of the things. That's why we switched from the Ethereum blockchain to the Ravencoin chain, because at the end of the day, again, it's all the elements in terms of being obviously the strengths where it lies in terms of asset tokenization, whether it be NFTs, property tokens on the Ravencoin chain. That's why we switched, and also the community. And just actually on the community side thing, I think sometimes communities can be underrated. And the Ravencoin community has got one of the best, if not the best community that I've seen. Like I've been around now for 6 months now on the Ravencoin community. And again, it's second to none. And that's actually was emphasised. Actually, the ladies, Megan and Jessica from the SDA Markets, that do their women in NFTs and show on YouTube, so it's under the SDA Markets. And actually yesterday they put out their new YouTube video about talking about communities and NFT communities and so forth. And they actually made a special mention about Ravencoin community as being a very strong and great community. So they themselves have seen that, obviously observed. They've got obviously access to all different type blockchain communities, and to make that point about the Ravencoin community was actually quite a great publicity piece for us as a Ravencoin community to have the ladies make that mention, which I actually posted up on our Twitter Spaces actually early today. So go and have a look, support the ladies because they're supporting the Ravencoin community, and they're trying to recruit a lot of women into the blockchain, and they're doing a great job in educating and keeping simple language to describe and articulate what blockchain is and what NFTs and what property tokens and so forth is. So they're doing a fantastic job there.
I agree.
But yes, look, we'll try to keep it to an hour. I think we're just gone over an hour. I'd like to thank Kevin. Thank you so much, Kevin, for your input here and sharing your experiences. And I'm sure all of us took a lot of value from those points you made. And again, we'll continue to be a great supporter of yours. And we thank you for your great support that you give to us, specifically in terms of BRIK VC, what you do for us as well.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Kevin. And Jake, any finalising words from you?
No, thanks for having me on today. Kevin, it was great speaking with you, and it was great hearing your thoughts on the subject.
Well, thank you all. Sorry, Kevin. So it's So look, thank you all for attending today. I think some people that came in sort of after didn't get a mention. Aleixo, thank you for coming on. Bono, thank you for coming on. Bonnie probably has some questions that I'll sit on Twitter. Maybe the next week we can have some questions from you, because you always like to sort of put the questions out there on Twitter on your posts. Thank you for coming on. Thank you, Paul. Philly, thank you for coming on. Sunny, thank you for coming on. And you all have a great day, great evening, great morning, depending where you're at. And see you again next week. Stay safe. Bye-bye now.